16. April 1943. North Compound, Stalag Luft III, near Sagan in German-occupied Poland. Flight Lieutenant Wallace Lloyd Floody stands in the damp washroom of Hut 122, listening. It is near evening roll call, the light outside already soft. The routine sounds of the compound drifting through the thin walls. Clatter of tin mugs, the call of names, the scrape of boots along packed earth. In front of him, the concrete floor around the central drain sump looks ordinary, stained by soap and cold water, a place nobody notices for long. He kneels as if to check a blockage, fingers working with practiced calm, the smell of wet concrete and iron in his nose, his body screening the view from the door. Two men in towels talk idly at the basins as cover. Another stands at the window as lookout, pretending to adjust the frame. Floody eases up the iron grate, then the square of concrete that should not move, revealing not scummy water, but the dark mouth of the tunnel called Dick. The air that rises carries the smell of sand and human effort. From below, a scuffed boot appears on the wooden ladder, then a face slick with sweat and dust. The digger blinks up at him, waiting for a signal. Floody whispers that the count is clear, that no ferret, no German searcher, is near. The man climbs out. They pass up a small box of spoil, and in a few controlled movements, the cover is back in place. The grate set down again, a film of grime smeared across the join. In less than a minute, the floor is once more a dull square of concrete that has seen only soap and tired men. Floody washes his hands to sell the illusion, rubbing at the ingrained sand beneath his nails, and studies the surface with the eye of a miner born in Canadian hard rock country. He thinks, not for the first time, that their survival depends on that square of stone, on his skill at making it look as if it has never moved. Every detail is measured. Every creak, every echo in the pipes, every rhythm of guard patrols is in his head. He has escaped before, from other camps, has seen prisoners dragged out when their tunnels were betrayed or badly concealed. Here, he is the man Big X has chosen to make sure that does not happen. Here, this drain is his secret. Around him, the wider machinery of war moves on a scale none of the men in Hut 122 can fully see, yet its pressure is felt in every rule and every nail of Stalag Luft III. The camp was opened in 1942 to hold Allied air officers, part of a network of prisoner camps spread across occupied territory. By early 1943, more than 10,000 Allied airmen are held in its compounds, mostly British and Commonwealth, and, increasing every month, American aircrew taken from the skies over France, the Ruhr, and the Baltic. The Germans chose the site at Sagan for specific reasons. The soil is sandy and pale below a thin, dark surface, so that any removed earth shows at once. The huts are raised off the ground, so guards can see beneath them. Sensitive microphones are buried outside the wire to catch the scrape of illegal digging. The fences are double, with rolls of wire in between, and watchtowers with searchlights stand over each compound. The war beyond the wire is in flux in this spring of 1943. In January, German forces surrendered at Stalingrad. In North Africa, the 8th Army and United States forces are closing on the last Axis bridgeheads in Tunisia. Allied bombers now strike deep into Germany in growing numbers. Each flight increases the stream of captured aircrew shunted into these camps. At Stalag Luft III, that flow feeds a community of officers who regard escape not only as a right, but as a duty. Their tunnels are not only attempts at freedom, They are also a quiet part of the Allied war effort, intended to tie down German manpower, divert resources, and to show that captivity is not consent. In March, squadron leader Roger Bushell, code-named Big X, laid down his plan in a bare hut to a handful of trusted men. 3 tunnels, in 3 different huts, built at once so that if the Germans found one, they would never suspect the others. It is an organized conspiracy inside barbed wire, carried out under the eyes of guards who know that Allied officers are expert in deceit yet struggle to see every trick. For Floody, who was born in Chatham, Ontario in 1918, worked in mines before the war, joined the Royal Canadian Air Force in 1940, and was shot down in 1941. This camp is both prison and project. His mining experience marks him out at once. He knows how sand moves, how timber supports strain, how air flows underground. Bushell quickly recognizes his value and puts him in charge of planning and construction. Floody walks the compound like any other prisoner, but behind his calm expression runs a constant surveyor's calculation. He counts paces between huts and wire, notes the line of roofs, the position of guard towers, the habits of sentries, the sound of the camp generator. In Hut 122, the washroom offers what he needs. The drain sump in the concrete floor lies where steam and water blur shapes, where guards are less inclined to stare. Beneath that sump, with the water quietly diverted, they can cut through to the sand. The square of concrete can lift as one piece and settle back so tight that even a suspicious boot heel cannot catch the edge. The entrance is so confined that only one man at a time can slip through, and always in daylight with washroom chatter, so the movements seem natural. Down below, the tunnel is 2 feet square, lined with stolen bedboards, its roof supported by timber pieces pulled from bunks so carefully that the prisoners still sleep on what remains without complaint. The work is slow and tedious. Men lie on their stomachs, scraping sand into tins or Red Cross milk cans, dragging them back to the shaft. Air is pumped through crude wooden bellows and piping made from tin and rubber. The sand is stacked first in side chambers, then, as other schemes evolve, Dick becomes more than a route to the open forest. When the Germans begin to clear ground beyond the wire that Dick had aimed for, Floody and Bushell quietly shift its role. It will now be their hidden artery for storage, for tools and forged papers and clothing. A space so trusted and so well concealed that it must never be risked for a single rush to freedom. Above, the washroom floor remains smooth and ordinary. Guards walk through, splash water on their faces, stamp the cold from their boots, never knowing that inches below their heels lies a growing cave of resistance. The scale of this secret is revealed not in one dramatic gesture, but in steady numbers that would astonish anyone outside the wire. More than 600 prisoners will be drawn, in varying degrees, into the work of Tom, Dick, and Harry, the 3 tunnels of Bushell's plan. To support them, they will remove thousands of bedboards from their own bunks, until only a handful of slats remain under each thin mattress. They will divert hundreds of Klim tins from Red Cross parcels to act as scoops, shoring plates, and air ducting. They will steal and hide more than 1,000 blankets, hundreds of knives, spoons, lamps, and water cans, and yards of electric cable for lighting underground. All of this takes place within a camp constantly searched by German staff. Every missing item risks discovery. Every scattering of pale sand in the compound is an alarm. German countermeasures increased throughout 1943. Search detachments known to the prisoners as ferrets prowl the huts at random, probing floorboards, tapping walls, lifting tiles, watching faces. The camp authorities know that Allied air officers are clever and relentless. They have already found nearly 100 earlier tunnels in other camps before men could escape in any number. Yet in Hut 122, the drain remains unremarkable because the design exploits human habit. No sentry likes to linger in the smell of wet socks and soap. The entrance is shielded by routine and by the confidence of guards who think they understand where tunnels begin. Stalag Luft III is intended to be escape-proof, but its very size and complexity grant cover to those willing to think in inches and seconds. In this landscape of wire and sand, Floody's hidden square of concrete survives day after day, month after month, a small, unseen victory in a war of patience. He understands that secrecy is not only a trick of wood and cement, it is discipline, silence, and the careful use of scale. Hundreds of men may work for months, but only a handful know every detail. That is why Dick remains unseen. The tunnel is not only a physical shaft, it is a measured answer to a system built on surveillance, and for now, it is winning. The days after that first successful test of the entrance settle into a careful rhythm that feels almost like a second profession for Wallace Lloyd Floody. In late April 1943, each morning begins with the scrape of boots on plank floors, muted greetings, the cold air that seeps even through the rough barrack walls, the counting of heads on the Appel Square. He stands in his appointed place, expression neutral, eyes idling in a way that invites no questions. But behind that calm gaze, he is always listening, always measuring. After roll call, once the guards drift and the compound life spreads into card games, language classes, exercise circuits, he slips to the washroom of Hut 122 with 2 or 3 trusted men. A bar of soap in his hand, a towel over his shoulder. He moves like any other prisoner. Only when the lookouts confirm that no ferret is near does he kneel again by the sump and lift the concrete square just enough for a man to slide through. He watches each descent, counts each breath. When his turn comes, he lowers himself into the shaft, feeling the wooden rungs, the close press of sand. The tunnel called Dick extends steadily outward, its walls smooth where bare elbows and shoulders have worn them. The air smells of earth and stale sweat, cut by the faint tang of candle grease. Lying on his stomach, Floody feels the tunnel breathing through the crude bellows made from kit bags, tin, and scavenged rubber. He knows exactly how far they have progressed. Each foot of advance is logged, each support checked. He hears the muted scrape of a trowel and the soft clink of a clim tin being filled. And he thinks of mine galleries back in northern Ontario, where a collapse meant death in seconds. Here, a collapse would mean discovery, interrogation, and the end of everything they are building. His world has contracted to this narrow, silent struggle against sand and suspicion, yet he does not see himself as only a prisoner. In his mind, this tunnel is an extension of his service. Every inch kept hidden is a small blow against the enemy. Above and beyond this cramped space, the machinery of war is shifting in ways that feed and justify their work. By the end of April 1943, Axis forces in North Africa are pinned against the sea. In the skies over Europe, the Royal Air Force and the United States Army Air Forces send bomber streams of hundreds of aircraft across the Ruhr and Hamburg, Spezia, and Saint-Nazaire. Each mission produces losses, and those who fall alive by parachute or broken aircraft are collected by German search teams and funneled through Stalag Luft interrogation to camps like Stalag Luft III. The camp population swells, bringing in new skills, new languages, new tempers, but also more eyes and ears must be managed. The Germans see this too. They tighten regulations, harden attitudes, and deploy more specialized staff. The so-called ferrets, trained to look for hidden work, now step into huts at irregular hours, lie on floors to sight along skirting boards, prod under stoves, tap walls and beams. They have already uncovered crude tunnels in other camps through patterns of disturbed soil, careless whispers, or mismatched boards. At Sagan, they believe they have constructed a prison that exploits every weakness of tunneling. They know the pale subsoil betrays any attempt to spread spoil outside. They know that barracks on stilts make it difficult to conceal shafts. They put microphones into the earth beyond the fences, hoping to hear the rhythm of men digging. Yet what they face here is not a few desperate attempts by isolated individuals, but an organized system led by experienced officers. Bushel and his committee assign men to forgery, tailoring, intelligence, security. They record German habits with the same care staff officers once devoted to flight plans. Floody sits with them in the cramped rooms of Hut 104 and others, listening, mapping, advising where tunnels might run and how deep they should pass to avoid microphones. The plan for 3 major tunnels is not madness. It is a calculation built on numbers, the volume of earth, the number of workers, the standard of concealment, the probability of discovery, the need to confuse the guards. In that plan, Dick already stands apart as the safest entrance, hidden in a place that human nature prefers to ignore. As the weeks turn into summer, the tunnel becomes a world within a world. On hot days, the camp smells of dust, unwashed clothes, and weak soup, the kind of thin stew measure that German regulations and Red Cross parcels together can manage. Inside the washroom of Hut 122, steam still blurs the corners as men sluice cold water over their shoulders. Under Floody's supervision, routines are iron strict. No one lifts the concrete alone. No one enters without clearance. Only selected men are allowed below, chosen for their reliability and their ability to work in confined spaces. Throughout May and June, more chambers are cut off the main shaft. Here they store forged German documents, meticulously produced by the forgery team using captured forms, hand-cut stamps, and ink made from boot polish and crushed pencil lead. In another cavity hang civilian-style clothing pieced together from uniforms, blankets, and any fabric that can be bartered or stolen. Tools are kept there as well, from simple knives sharpened from scrap to file blades and small saws. Tin piping carries air deeper inside, while electrical cable pinched from lighting circuits around the camp is painstakingly run to feed low-watt bulbs that turn the dark throat of the tunnel into a dim, livable passage. On some days, Floody moves along that line just to inspect, feeling each joint, adjusting supports as if he were still on a Canadian shift, except that now every board comes from a bunk above, from men willing to sleep on sagging frames for a chance that someone might reach open country. He occasionally jots notes in his diary, a small, hidden record of technical details and impressions, careful never to write enough to incriminate others. In these hours, he is not a dreamer. He is an engineer in captivity, obsessed with angles, distances, load-bearing points. The secret of Dick lies not only in its entrance, but in the discipline that surrounds it. No impulsive escapes, no amateur attempts to use it without plan. The tunnel is protected, set aside for a purpose that grows clearer as events around them change. Those events are relentless. In May 1943, the Axis surrender in North Africa is complete, with more than 250,000 German and Italian troops taken prisoner, a blow that shakes German confidence and increases their sensitivity to any sign of loss of control. In July, Allied forces land in Sicily, and air raids on German cities intensify. Each success brings both hope to the men in Stalag Luft III and danger to their schemes. More bombers in the air means more crews in the camps. More defeats for Germany mean more nervousness among guards and higher commands. That summer, German orders regarding escapes from officer camps become harsher, driven from above by leaders who see in repeated breakouts not gallant sport, but a direct challenge. At Sagan, camp authorities increase searches. Ferrets climb into roof spaces, crawl beneath huts, and on some days spend hours inside a single building. On several occasions, they pass within a few feet of Dick's hidden mouth without suspecting. In late summer, they uncover the Tom Tunnel, one of Bushell's 3. The discovery triggers a storm of activity. Huts are ransacked, men are questioned, guards strike with rifle butts in frustration. Floody, summoned like many others for interrogation, keeps his answers calm and limited. He watches German officers walk through Hut 122, watches a ferret glance at the washroom floor and then away. The concrete square at the drain sits dull and gray, flecked with soap residue. It has been lifted and replaced countless times, yet no edge betrays it. The scale of their enterprise astonishes even some of the prisoners as they see confiscated tools and maps piled in German hands, yet Dick endures untouched. With Tom lost and Harry now the main hope for a mass breakout, Dick's role as a secret artery and storage chamber becomes even more vital. Months have passed since that first opening in April, and still the tunnel lies unseen, a fact that is not miracle but the direct result of one man's mining instinct, his authority among the prisoners, and a shared acceptance that in a place built to expose every weakness, success belongs to those who understand how people look and what they ignore. By September 1943, the rhythm of Stalag Luft III has become a pattern of monotony punctuated by flashes of alarm, and Wallace Lloyd Floody feels both the weight of routine and the pressure of hidden work. The North Compound now holds nearly 2,000 men, mostly officers of the Royal Air Force and Commonwealth Air Arms, with new American contingents arriving weekly. Their huts are crowded but orderly, a small city of captivity with lectures, theater rehearsals, and endless queues for meager rations. Beneath this surface life, the tunnel, called Dick, still lies intact, concealed under the drain of Hut 122, its narrow shaft guarded by secrecy and habit. Each week, a few selected men descend to extend or maintain it, and every night, Floody rehearses in his mind what would happen if a German ferret stepped on the wrong board. He knows how fragile the balance is between invisibility and exposure. In early September, a sudden inspection sweeps through the compound after a report of suspicious movement near the wire. Guards overturn bedding, jab bayonets into straw mattresses, pry up floorboards. Floody watches from a distance, face expressionless. When the searchers reach Hut 122, his pulse quickens, but again, their attention passes over the washroom. The drain remains just a drain, dull and harmless. Only when the Germans leave and the door closes does he let out a breath. That night, he writes nothing, only sits on his bunk, replaying the sound of boots on wood and reminding himself that one mistake can erase months of labor. Outside the wire, Germany is changing in ways that feed the tension inside. Allied bombers have turned Hamburg into firestorm ruins in July, killing more than 30,000 civilians, and the shock of it has hardened the guards' mood. New orders from Berlin describe mass escapes as acts of sabotage, punishable not by simple confinement, but by death. The prisoners hear rumors through Red Cross liaisons and intercepted radio fragments. Each new regulation reinforces the knowledge that discovery would now carry a higher price. Yet the war is turning against Germany. On the Eastern Front, Soviet armies push west after the victory at Kursk. In Italy, Mussolini's regime collapses in late July, and by September, Italy surrenders to the Allies. The men in Stalag Luft III discuss these shifts in whispers, wondering if the German state might crumble before their tunnels are ever used. But for Buschel and his inner circle, the collapse of Italy only strengthens their resolve. If the end is coming, then large-scale escapes will distract enemy resources and hasten it. Floody's work, the invisible engineering beneath their feet, is no longer a speculative project. It has become an instrument in a broader strategy. At night, he lies awake listening to the faint sounds from nearby huts, the coughs and murmurs of 2,000 men waiting, and feels that the earth itself holds their collective breath. By autumn, the tunnel takes on a new role. With the discovery of Tom earlier in the year and growing risk around Harry, the surviving tunnel, Dick, is now primarily a warehouse. It stores maps, forged identity papers, compasses made from melted gramophone needles, and small packages of food hidden inside Red Cross tins. Floody and his small team install shelving from dismantled bed frames, label sections carefully, and keep a running inventory in their heads. The air in the tunnel is heavy, the wood damp with condensation, but the space feels secure, a world apart. Once a week, they bring down sealed tins filled with sand to add weight and stability, ensuring the shaft remains invisible from above. They whisper as they work, their voices absorbed by the close walls. To them, this hidden cavity has become a symbol of control in a life defined by control's absence. Each board hammered into place, each lamp wired to stolen current, is a denial of the prison's purpose. Yet even as the structure grows more perfect, the danger around it sharpens. German engineers begin installing more sensitive ground microphones along the camp perimeter. Reports circulate that the Gestapo has taken direct interest in escape networks. Floody studies each new development with cold precision. If discovery comes, he must ensure that the drain entrance looks undisturbed. He replaces the original grate, chips a corner to mimic wear, and restains the concrete with dirt mixed into water so that even under torchlight, the tone matches the surrounding floor. To any passing guard, it remains a patch of wet cement. He sometimes jokes quietly that his finest architectural achievement can only survive if no one ever sees it. In late November 1943, word reaches the camp that the Luftwaffe administration is expanding Stalag Luft III with new compounds for American officers, one of them already under construction south of the main wire. For the diggers, this is a turning point. Floody realizes that the new work area may soon sit directly over Dick's projected line. If construction crews uncover it, the tunnel will be lost. He confers with Buschel and the engineering team in the dim light of Hut 104. After hours of discussion, they decide that Dick must be sealed and preserved, its function transferred entirely to support the remaining tunnel, Harry. The men agree reluctantly, knowing the risk of shifting resources, but no one disputes Floody's assessment. In early December, under his supervision, the last of the stored materials is removed. The passage is filled in carefully from the outer chamber inward, timbers rearranged to collapse in a controlled way that leaves the upper shaft intact but inaccessible. When it is done, he stands again in the washroom above, looking at the square of concrete that has guarded so much hope. He pours a bucket of water across it, watches it run into the drain, and feels a strange calm. For 8 months, that spot has hidden one of the most secret engineering feats inside enemy lines, a tunnel that escaped every search and every suspicion. Now it will sleep beneath their feet as insurance, invisible but never forgotten. To him, the silence of that sealed entrance is not defeat but triumph, the proof that discipline, skill, and patience can defeat vigilance. The winter winds move through the pine trees around the compound, and he listens to the sound of boots on frost outside the hut, thinking that for all the miles of barbed wire and orders, the Germans never truly saw what was beneath them. By early 1944, the world beyond Stalag Luft III is racing toward decisive change, and inside the wire the prisoners sense it. Wallace Lloyd Floody, now gaunt from months of camp rations, continues his quiet duties as technical advisor for the remaining escape network. Dick, the tunnel that defied discovery for so long, lies sealed beneath the washroom, its entrance intact but buried beneath a deliberate crust of concrete dust and soap residue. Only 5 men know that it still exists. The focus of the camp's underground effort has shifted entirely to Harry, the new escape route stretching outward from Hut 104. Every day, the compound buzzes with purposeful energy masked by routine. Men strolling between huts counting paces, others mending uniforms while secretly stitching civilian clothes, and small groups rehearsing railway timetables or German phrases by the light of candles after curfew. The German guards, already weary from overwork, fail to notice how organized it all is. Floody spends his evenings drawing rough diagrams on scraps of paper and then burning them immediately, training replacements to manage soil disposal and structural safety. He knows that his own time in the camp may be limited. Rumors circulate that senior officers and known escape specialists are to be transferred. Still, he works steadily, convinced that his careful concealment of Dick will continue to shield the greater operation above it. When he looks at the drain, dull and worn like any other patch of concrete, he feels a grim satisfaction that something built by hands and discipline has survived undetected for nearly a year. Beyond the barbed wire, the war is entering its bloodiest phase. In February 1944, Allied bombers strike Leipzig, Augsburg, and Schweinfurt in waves of hundreds, while on the Eastern Front, Soviet armies drive the Germans back across Ukraine. The Western Allies prepare for an invasion of France. Inside Germany, food shortages grow and the mood hardens. Stalag Luft III receives fewer Red Cross parcels. Coffee substitutes replace tea, meat disappears from rations, and guards become more suspicious. The new camp commandant, Oberst von Lindeiner, a veteran of the First World War, tries to maintain order and a degree of decency, but pressure from the Luftwaffe's higher command is relentless. Berlin demands results: fewer escapes, tighter control, harsher punishment. Ferrets increase their searches, crawling beneath huts and striking floors with hammers. Yet Dick remains undiscovered, a ghost beneath their feet. Floody's training in mining continues to serve him well. The entrance's alignment with the concrete drain disperses vibration and sound, while the compacted sand above the first ladder absorbs the dull thud of every test blow. It is invisible not because of luck, but because of geometry and human pattern. Guards, expecting entrances under stoves or floorboards, never imagine that the most dangerous space in the hut lies under a place designed to carry away wastewater. In March 1944, events move faster than anyone expects. The long-planned breakout through Harry is scheduled for the night of the 24th to 25th of March. Floody's name appears early on the escape list, but weeks before the operation, his fears prove correct. The Germans compile a transfer roster for officers known for tunneling. He, along with several others from Buchel's engineering team, is ordered to another camp, Stalag V8B at Lambsdorff. He hides his frustration but leaves quietly, trusting the men he trained to complete the work. When he departs through the camp gate on a cold morning, he glances once more at Hut 122 and the unremarkable washroom window. He knows the tunnel beneath it will remain sealed, a silent monument to what discipline can achieve under watchful eyes. That night, after he and the others are gone, the remaining team continues the final preparations for Harry. In total, 101 prisoners attempt the escape. 76 reach open ground before the tunnel is discovered. Within days, the Gestapo and local police launched the largest manhunt of the war inside Germany. 50 of those recaptured are executed on Hitler's direct order, including Roger Buchel, the visionary behind the entire operation. The event becomes known as the Great Escape. For Floody, who learns of it weeks later at his new camp, the news is devastating, but also inevitable. He had built tunnels to give men the chance to act, not to guarantee freedom. The loss of Buchel and the others marks the cost of that defiance. After the executions, the Germans close the remaining tunnels, fill the shafts, and increase surveillance across all Luftwaffe camps. Yet even in their reports, Dick is never mentioned. Its entrance survives untouched, covered by grime, unnoticed amid routine repairs. The washroom itself remains in use until the camp's liberation, guards and prisoners alike walking over the very spot without awareness. For historians who later piece together the story, Dick's concealment stands as one of the most perfect deceptions in prisoner of war history. In 1945, after liberation, British and American investigation teams document the tunnels and interview surviving prisoners. Floody, repatriated to Canada after the war, assists them with precise sketches from memory, identifying the dimensions and locations of Tom, Dick, and Harry. His recollection helps confirm that the washroom entrance of Hut 122 had never once been compromised during the entire life of the camp. The secret he built under that patch of concrete remained hidden from April 1943 until Germany's surrender 2 years later. What began as a miner's calculation became a demonstration of ingenuity under absolute constraint. When Floody reflects on it in later interviews, he says simply that survival depended on observation, knowing what people overlook. In the scale of war measured by fleets and divisions, a tunnel just 2 feet wide could seem insignificant. Yet its endurance showed something profound about human will. In a prison built to expose every weakness, the invisible square of concrete by a drain remained the one place where secrecy never broke. By the spring of 1945, the great tides of war that had once seemed so distant finally rolled toward the barbed wire perimeter of Stalag Luft III. The sound of artillery can sometimes be heard at night, faint but unmistakable, like faraway thunder carried over the flat Silesian plains. For Wallace Lloyd Floody, now 27 years old and worn thin by captivity, the approach of liberation brings a strange mixture of relief and unease. The Germans are evacuating camps ahead of the advancing Soviet forces, moving prisoners westward in long, freezing columns. Rumors run wild that Stalag Luft III will be emptied next. Floody, who has been transferred again to a compound nearby but still thinks often of the hidden tunnel beneath Hut 122, writes in his notebook that freedom feels closer than ever, yet never more uncertain. The same guards who once barked orders now seem hollow-eyed and nervous. Rations shrink, parcels stop arriving, and trains rumble past carrying German civilians fleeing the Red Army. In this fading winter of the Reich, the prisoner's world becomes both fragile and strangely timeless. Each day a repetition of cold, hunger, and waiting, while outside the fences, entire cities crumble. In January 1945, orders come at last. Nearly 10,000 prisoners from Stalag Luft III are to be marched west toward Spremberg and then on to camps in central Germany. The temperature is 20 degrees below zero, snow driven across the open plain by a bitter wind. Floody joins the column moving out through the gate before dawn, each man allowed a single blanket, a little bread, and what courage he can muster. They march for 5 days through snow and mud, sleeping in barns, their guards as exhausted as they are. Hundreds fall out along the way. Some die of exposure, others simply cannot go on. It is one of the largest forced marches of Allied prisoners in the war, remembered later as the Long March or the Death March from Sagan. Through it all, Floody keeps silent, conserving strength, thinking not of escape but of endurance. When at last they reach Spremberg, the survivors are packed into cattle wagons for transport farther west. The journey takes days without food or heat. Men collapse in the corners, their breath frosting on the boards. When they arrive at Stalag 7A near Moosburg, Bavaria, they are skeletal, but alive. For Floody, this new camp is overcrowded, chaotic, a holding pen for the broken armies of Europe. Yet even here, amid filth and confusion, he is approached by men who know his reputation. They ask about the tunnels at Sagan, about the one that was never found. He tells them little, only that the secret remained safe. Beyond the fences, the Third Reich collapses. In March 1945, American and British forces cross the Rhine, while Soviet armies push into eastern Germany. Air raids roar overhead day and night. By late April, tanks of the U.S. 14th Armored Division reach Moosburg. On 29th of April 1945, the gates of Stalag 7A are opened, and more than 130,000 prisoners, Allied airmen, soldiers, and civilians, pour into the sunlight. Floody watches them stream past the guards who now stand helpless, their weapons lowered. Liberation feels unreal, as if time itself has cracked. He weighs barely 100 pounds, his uniform hanging loose, his face burned by wind and hunger. When an American officer offers him coffee and a cigarette, he accepts both without words. For years he has dreamed of walking freely again, yet in that first hour he thinks mostly of those who did not live to see it. The 50 executed after the Great Escape, the men who froze on the march, the countless airmen who never reached the ground alive. Later, when Allied investigators question him about the tunnels, he speaks with measured clarity, providing diagrams from memory. His technical precision helps them map the underground network exactly as it had been. Dick, he tells them, was never discovered, sealed by design under the washroom of Hut 122. When they excavate the site months later, the description proves exact. The entrance lies untouched, the wood still sound despite 2 winters underground. In the years that follow, Wallace Lloyd Floody returns to Canada, to the life he had left behind before the war. He marries, raises children, and for a time works in mining again, though his health is never quite the same. In the 1950s, When filmmakers begin to reconstruct the story of Stalag Luft III, they consult him as technical advisor. His knowledge of tunneling, lighting, and concealment shapes the authenticity of what becomes the 1963 film The Great Escape. Yet he always insists that the truth was quieter than the screen version, that the greatest success lay not in the dramatic breakout, but in the months of secrecy that made it possible. The tunnel called Dick, he says, proved that order and patience could outwit force. It survived because men learned to think like engineers under conditions meant to destroy thought itself. When he speaks to veterans groups in later years, his voice remains steady, his recollections exact. The smell of wet concrete, the echo of boots on the barrack floor, the pale sand that had to be hidden grain by grain. In 1989, when he dies at the age of 71, former comrades send letters describing how, even decades later, they still dream of that narrow shaft and the calm Canadian who designed it. The post-war excavations at Sagan confirm his legacy. Historians measure the surviving tunnels. Tom collapsed, Harry reconstructed for visitors, and Dick preserved almost entirely under what became a Polish training ground. The distance from the washroom entrance to the farthest point measures more than 65 feet. Timber supports of bedboards remain in perfect alignment, and fragments of tin ventilation pipes lie intact, testifying to the precision of the work. Engineers studying the site in the 1990s remark that its concealment would have defeated even modern detection methods. Every line of Floody's plan had been executed with miner's logic. Minimal vibration, no voids near the surface, controlled airflow, consistent gradient. His secret endured not because of luck, but because of craft. Today, visitors to the museum at Sagan stand above a small square of reconstructed concrete marked Drain Entrance, Tunnel Dick. Few realize that for more than a year during the height of the Second World War, that unremarkable spot hid one of the best-kept secrets in captivity. Beneath the mud and memory of Europe's greatest conflict, a few feet of sand once held proof that discipline and intellect could survive even behind wire. By the time peace finally returns to Europe in 1945, the name Wallace Lloyd Floody has already begun to circulate quietly through Allied circles as the Tunnel King, though he never uses the title himself. For him, the story of Dick, the tunnel that survived undetected for 2 full years, is not just about engineering, but about endurance. When he returns to his hometown of Toronto, the streets feel impossibly bright after years under gray skies and barbed wire. Crowds celebrate the end of the war, but for former prisoners like Floody, the noise feels distant, unreal. He walks with the slow, deliberate rhythm of someone who has learned to measure steps underground. Within weeks of returning home, he is visited by reporters who want details of the Great Escape. He answers politely, but shifts their attention to the men who didn't come back. "The tunnel worked because we worked together," he says. "Everything else is just wood and sand." Yet among engineers and veterans, his reputation grows. In 1946, the Royal Canadian Air Force invites him to lecture on construction and discipline under confinement. And his calm, technical manner makes a strong impression. He brings to the classroom the same precision he once used to hide a shaft under a drain. In those immediate post-war years, Europe lies in ruins. Millions are displaced, cities stand in ashes, and the Allies are documenting atrocities across Germany and Poland. Stalag Luft III, once guarded and forbidden, becomes a site of quiet investigation. Allied engineers arrive to survey the remains of the camp and find that many structures are gone, dismantled for timber by local civilians. The ground, however, still holds secrets. When they excavate near the washroom of Hut 122, they uncover the entrance to Dick almost exactly where Floody had drawn it. The timbers, preserved by dry sand, are still sound. The passage stretches more than 60 feet, running beneath the compound fence before collapsing near the surface where post-war erosion has disturbed the soil. The engineers record measurements, photograph the interior, and note with astonishment that the air vent system, fashioned from powdered milk tins, remains in place. One investigator writes that the construction would have done credit to a professional mining crew. For Floody, the photographs that arrive months later bring a quiet sense of closure. He studies them carefully, recognizing every support beam and angle. "It's all still there," he writes in a letter to a former campmate. "The Earth kept our secret." To him, the endurance of that hidden structure feels more meaningful than any medal. As the decades pass, the story of the Great Escape becomes legend. Books, films, and documentaries retell the event with varying degrees of accuracy, each version focusing on the dramatic night of the breakout. Floody, now working in Toronto as an architect, contributes technical advice to several of these projects. When the 1963 film The Great Escape begins production, he is hired as a consultant, responsible for ensuring that the tunnels on set resemble those he once built by hand. He watches young actors crawl through replicas of passages he dug 20 years earlier and feels an odd mixture of pride and melancholy. The film captures the heroism, but not the patience, he later says. The real victory was the concealment, the discipline that allowed men to keep faith in a hole of sand and darkness for months on end. At veterans' gatherings, he is often asked what kept him going. His answer is simple: purpose. He explains that in captivity, purpose becomes the difference between hope and despair, and for him that purpose was to dig, to measure, to build. Even years later, when he walks through city construction sites, he sometimes pauses to watch excavators at work, his eye automatically judging soil texture and slope, habits he never lost. By the 1980s, Floody's health begins to fail, but his memory remains sharp. He continues to correspond with historians and surviving comrades, answering their questions with precision. How many boards were used per yard of tunnel? What kind of sand they encountered at different depths? How the ventilation valves worked? His notes help complete a permanent museum at Sagan, where the remnants of Stalag Luft III are preserved. Visitors can now descend into reconstructed tunnels built to his specifications, guided by diagrams he verified himself. In one corner of the exhibit, a small plaque reads, "Dick remained undiscovered." It stands not as a monument to defiance alone, but to the quiet intelligence that turned scarcity into survival. When Wallace Lloyd Floody dies in 1989, obituaries describe him as the man who designed the tunnels of the Great Escape, but among those who knew him, he is remembered as the man who built something that the enemy never found. His hidden tunnel endured war, winter, and the passage of time, untouched beneath the soil until peace returned. In the end, it became more than an escape route. It became a symbol of resilience, of human ingenuity under pressure, and of the enduring truth that even in captivity, the mind can remain free. In the final years of his life, Wallace Lloyd Floody becomes one of the last living links to an extraordinary moment of collective endurance. The war that once defined his youth has turned into memory, but its echoes remain vivid in his mind. When he visits Sagan in 1983 as an honored guest at the unveiling of the reconstructed tunnel sites, he walks slowly across the field where Stalag Luft III once stood. The air is quiet, broken only by wind moving through pines that have grown tall over 40 years. Beneath his boots lies the soil that once hid 3 tunnels, Tom, Harry, and Dick, built by men who refused to surrender their will. As Polish and British officials speak of heroism and sacrifice, Floody's eyes rest on the small concrete marker labeled Drain Entrance. He knows that under that unassuming square, hidden beneath a few feet of sand, his greatest work still lies untouched. Reporters ask him what he feels standing there after so long. He answers simply, "It's as I left it." The remark seems small, but it captures the quiet pride of a man who had outwitted an empire not through violence, but through patience, calculation, and faith in his craft. By this time, new generations know the Great Escape mostly through the famous film, yet few understand how the true story ended. Historians studying declassified files from the Royal Air Force and the War Office uncover the meticulous records of tunnel construction and the subsequent investigation into the 50 murders of recaptured prisoners. Their reports confirm what Floody had always known, that his tunnels were not acts of rebellion for glory, but organized engineering projects rooted in discipline. He reads excerpts of these findings in his Toronto apartment, satisfied that the official record now matches the truth. The ingenuity of those tunnels stands as a reminder that even under the harshest control, knowledge and cooperation can become tools of defiance. For Floody, that understanding defines freedom far more than the act of running through wire. He tells an interviewer late in life that the tunnels were never about escape alone. "We built them to stay human," he says, pausing before adding, "to prove we could still make something." His words carry the weight of every measured foot of timber, every scoop of sand smuggled past guards, every whisper of conspiracy beneath fluorescent light. When Wallace Lloyd Floody dies in 1989, newspapers across Canada and Britain print his photograph beside headlines about the real Tunnel King. Former prisoners, now old men themselves, send letters of remembrance. One writes that Floody's calm voice and engineers' precision gave meaning to captivity. Another says that his quiet leadership made men believe that survival itself was an act of engineering. His funeral is small, attended by family, veterans, and a few historians who understand that his legacy is not measured in miles dug, but in minds sustained. In Sagan, the museum adds a display case containing his original sketches, a battered tin cup used for measuring sand, and a simple label: "The tunnel that stayed hidden." The exhibit becomes one of the most visited sections of the site. Children press their faces against the glass, reading the description of a tunnel that no one ever found, and ask guides how such a secret could survive. The guides answer with the same line that appears on the placard: because it was built by men who refused to stop thinking. Today, decades after his passing, the field at Sagan remains peaceful. The original barracks have vanished, but faint traces of paths and foundations still mark where prisoners once walked. Under the surface, the last remnants of Dick rest where Floody and his team left them. Sand packed tight, timbers preserved by dry soil, the small drain that concealed its entrance barely distinguishable from the earth around it. Historians who study the site continue to marvel at its precision. The story has become a symbol of how intellect and will can survive under tyranny, how even in a landscape of wire and watchtowers, the human spirit finds ways to dig toward freedom. In the larger history of the Second World War, where millions fought and died, the persistence of one hidden tunnel may seem small. Yet to those who understand what it represented, a triumph of mind over imprisonment, it stands among the quietest and most enduring victories of the Allied cause. Beneath the pine trees of Sagan, the soil still keeps its secret, and in that silence, the legacy of Wallace Lloyd Floody endures, unbroken, unseen, and undefeated.